Welcome in to the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe. I'm Ross Geiger, the former NBA video coordinator, and I'm joined alongside Bruce Bernstein, our four-time Emmy Award winner who spent more than 3 decades at ESPN producing NBA shows, SportsCenter, and soaking up knowledge from the best hoop analysts in the business. Also joining us is the 2-time Emmy Award winner, Michael Willoughby-Freer, who's a senior writer at Stat Factor, specializing in writing advanced statistical NBA reports for various announcers across the league. And tonight, we're thrilled to be joined by special guest and dear friend of the show, Dave Wohl, who's legitimately done it all in the NBA. He's a former player, coach, and front office executive. So we're thrilled to have him on for tonight's show, the NBA trade deadline debrief. This is episode number 223, the Jaren Jackson Jr. episode, as Triple J won the league's Defensive Player of the Year award with the Memphis Grizzlies in 2023. But as we all know, Jaren was recently told to pack his bags up and head to Salt Lake City. That's one of our many topics of conversation we have here to cover here tonight. So let's get right into things here, Bruce, with some big deals.
Well, Dave was formerly the general manager of the Los Angeles Clippers, so it certainly makes sense to start with those guys. Dave, welcome back. So despite their recent surge and recovering in the Western standings, the Clips were sellers at the deadline. They traded James Harden to Cleveland for Darius Garland, then really surprising the NBA world by sending Ivica Zubac to the Pacers in exchange for Benedict Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, 2 first-round picks, and 1 second-round pick. What's your impression of what your old team was doing at the deadline, Dave?
Yeah, it's a good question because, Steve Ballmer, their owner, who's been a terrific owner, doesn't want to go through a rebuild. He wants to stay competitive and kind of go from there. Kawhi's still there. But clearly the Harden trade, Garland's a nice player. It's not that he isn't a good player, and they got a couple of draft picks which they needed to restock their cupboard. The Zubac trade surprised me because, he's really developed into a really nice big man. And so I think they're trying to maybe reset in a way that keeps them competitive. I don't think maybe they thought they could not keep up this surge. I think they were 17-3 or something like that. And, maybe Harden walked in and said, hey, look, guys, I just think I'd like to go with a team, that really has a chance to win it. I don't think we can keep this up. And from everything I've read, they liked Harden. He got along with everybody. So it could have been a number of those reasons. I think Garland will play well for him, but I don't think he's going to be able to do the same things, obviously, Harden does even at 35.
Hey, Dave, the Memphis Grizzlies, they traded one of their cornerstone pieces, but it wasn't John Morant. It turned out to be Jaren Jackson Jr., who they sent to Utah on an 8-player deal, involved a number of other minor players, as it were, and along with some first-round picks. And Walter Clayton Jr., rookie, came back. Kyle Anderson, a veteran, came back, and some other players. What was your take on that deal?
Well, I want to look at it first from Memphis' side. It's really interesting. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Memphis had won, 50 games, 2 seasons in a row. They had Ja, they had Jaren Jackson, they get Bane, and all of a sudden they've got a big 3. They actually had drafted Walter Kessler, who now is on Utah. So it's going to be funny that Jaren Jackson is going to end up playing with Kessler. So I just was surprised why Memphis didn't kind of take the Sam Presti patience route. And one of the things I thought they did is they moved on from Dillon Brooks. And I thought that was like for silly reasons. We got a couple flagrants or suspended or whatever. He gave them an identity in a lot of ways defensively. And now he was gone. And now all of a sudden, Jaren Jackson's gone. Bane is gone. So to me, Memphis is sort of surrendered. They wanted the quick fix. It didn't happen. Okay, we traded Brooks, who's helped Houston and Phoenix since he's been gone. And so I guess they decided they'd move on, get as much as they could for Jaren Jackson. And I was kind of surprised Ja didn't go, but I think his value has really slid. I don't think he's as valuable as he was, his first, second year in the league. He had a couple of the incidents with guns and some other things. And I think people are wondering how important basketball is to him anymore. Doing well, being part of the team, coming every day and producing, or is it just the NBA life that's attracted to him? So I like what Danny Ainge did. I really do, because having been with Danny in Boston, I think Danny has a good pulse of his own team usually. And I think he's thinking this was the time. I've got a couple players now. They're doing well. I've got Markkanen, George, the point guard kid, and now I can add Jaren Jackson. I bring Kessler back healthy. I've got a strong 4 guys for beginning next year. And I think Danny's thinking I can make a nice big jump next year. He still gets the draft pick he wants this year. I don't know how much you'll actually see Jaren Jackson playing 38, 40 minutes a game going for wins when it's a close game in the end, because I think there's still a little bit of, let's get our draft pick in the top, 3 or 5 this year. Then we'll put them all together beginning of next year. Kessler's healthy. But I think it was a great move by Danny. And it reminds me, when we were in Boston, we had the second worst record in the league, and we thought we were going to get either Durant or Odin. And we pull up number 5 instead. And so finally, Danny does the trade for Ray Allen with Seattle. Allen comes. Now we've got Pierce and Allen. And that was what allowed KG to decide, you know what, I need to leave Minnesota. We can be a big 3 there. And they end up winning a title the next year. So I see a lot of Danny's normal kind of planning and maneuvering behind this.
As a longtime Celtics fan, my motto was always "In Danny we trust," because it always felt like, he never really made any boneheaded moves. And luckily for Boston fans, Brad Stevens is kind of, in that category now as well. But how much more of a challenge is it going to be for him to kind of build on what he's done in Utah versus what he did in Boston, which was and is one of the marquee franchises in the league, as opposed to Utah, which is, just a team out west. I mean, Stockton Malone ain't walking through that door, folks. This is not those Utah Jazz. This is a different version. Do you think he has enough, cunning and cleverness to pull off what he did in Boston and in Utah?
To give you a little bit of a comparison, over the last 10 years or so, OKC was just another team in the middle of the breadbasket. Okay.
Yep.
Presti had a great deal of patience, smart as heck, did a great, fantastic job. So I think Danny's saying, okay, nobody's really cares about us now. Nobody's paying attention. But now he's got 4 interesting players who can play. Mm-hmm. And once Kessler gets healthy, and now he's got to fill in behind them. And if he gets somewhere in the top 4 picks this year, he's going to get a great player in the draft from what the draft looks like. And all of a sudden now he's got maybe 5 guys. And now he's just filling in around the margins, 6 through 9. And that makes it a lot easier. So I like the fact that he's probably figured out this group is my foundation to build around now. Just like Pierce, Allen, and KG were the ones in Boston, or when he got Tatum and he got, Jaylen Brown. These are the guys he's gonna build around now, and he's got a bunch of draft picks, I think, still and everything. So I think the thing I loved about Danny the most was he was never afraid of making a bad trade. Like, he would do his work, he would do his homework. And once he decided he was going to make a trade, he never kind of backed away because, what if it's a bad trade and the media comes down on me and the owners don't like it? Danny didn't have any of that stuff. He believed in what he was doing and his basketball instincts. And I think this was another one of these great moves.
Hey, Dave, I have a quick question here. We were talking about Utah. Over the weekend, they played the Magic in Orlando with Jaren Jackson in the lineup and the new look. And they absolutely dominated Orlando for the first 3 quarters. They had a nice, comfortable lead. And then, mysteriously, 4 of their 5 starters sat in the entire 4th quarter. Orlando comes back and wins the game. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on it. I mean, obviously, they weren't really trying to win that game. So I'm just kind of curious, what kind of a look do you think that sends to the league or whatever, the reputation, where it was a blatant act of tanking. Just instead of before the game, they waited until the 4th quarter, and it worked out in their favor. But it really did not. It's a little under the radar, but for a fan like me, it really did not look good.
Yeah, I think the NBA's got to worry a little bit, Michael, because it's a really good draft this year, supposedly. So teams that are down the bottom that made good trades, you can even look at we'll talk about Washington a little later, but they get AD and they get Trae Young. We don't know if you'll see them the rest of the season. Next year may be the year for them, because I don't know that Washington wants to all of a sudden win, go on a 9-game winning streak, if those guys can contribute. So what guys like Danny and those guys seem to be doing is, look, I can get him involved with his teammates. He scored 26 and 27 minutes or 22 and 23 minutes. But yeah, maybe he doesn't have to play the fourth quarter. I want my other guys to figure out the fourth quarter. And it's not a good look, because the whole thing is you want to win games, but what they're trying to balance is, we got some really good guys for next year. We don't want to really lose our draft position. We just want to look like we're playing hard. We might still be losing games, but we're going to stay in that top 4, top 5 draft position. And I think there's a couple teams that are down there that are looking at that.
All right. And with that said, obviously, I think when you look at the Utah Jazz too, Dave, what's going to be interesting for this group is the fact that their head coach, Will Hardy, had a handful of years now to kind of develop. But now, come next year, the pressure's on for him to actually compete and produce wins. So that should be a fun change to see. From all accounts, he sounds like he's a hell of a good guy and a great coach and a smart mind in this league. But pressure's on starting next year.
The only thing I would tell you, the pressure's on even when you're losing, because you keep thinking, God, if I keep losing, I'm out of a job. The other side is, if I don't win, I'm out of a job. But if you have better players, that pressure's better, because you may be able to win with those guys.
Yeah, good point there. Now, you just mentioned it just a second ago here, but we've talked about some big surprises with what the Clippers moves. Of course, Jaren Jackson being on the move out of Memphis. But I don't think there's any bigger surprise than what the Washington Wizards were able to do at the trade deadline. This was a team that was built solely on a young core. They were rolling out fresh, young lineups each and every night. And all of a sudden, at a blink of an eye, they've got both Trae Young and Anthony Davis after the trade deadline. So, they didn't give up much to get both of these superstars. I mean, CJ McCollum, Corey Kispert to Atlanta for Trae. Then they dealt 2 first-round draft picks and 3 second-round draft picks, along with Middleton, A.J. Johnson, and a couple other guys for Anthony Davis, D'Angelo Russell, Jaden Hardy, and Dante Exum. Just curious to get your thoughts on this complete pivot by the Wizards. Do you think they did this a little too early, or when you have the opportunity to get talents such as Trae Young and Anthony Davis, did they make a smart move here?
It's an interesting question, because if Young and AD come back this year and play, there's about 50 games remaining, something like that, either side of that. Who do they take shots from? They're going to take shots from Sarr, the young rookie they have, who's making progress this year. They're going to take shots from some of the other guys, because, Young is not going to come on the court and take 5 shots a game, and neither is AD. So all of a sudden, your offense is changing dramatically away from the guys you're trying to develop, who've only had 2, maybe 3 years, some of those guys. So to me, that's the question. Why not stay on the development path, get another great, draft pick? And the other thing, and it's not a criticism in a sense, but Trae Young and AD have never been seen as leaders. They're not a Mike Conley kind of guy. They're not a KG type of guy, and so you're not getting some additional intangibles from them to develop your young guys, at least as far as we know. They're not going to take the young guys under their wing and give them some lessons and bring them along. Be nice if they would. So this may be another case where they don't mind if AD and Young don't play much the rest of the year. They'll keep developing the young guys. They'll get another draft pick, kind of what Michael was referring to. And the question then will be, are they going to keep them? After the season's over, will there be somebody else who wants AD that can, give them somebody maybe younger that is still developing? Same with Trae Young. So I'm just curious why the rush to get those 2 guys, because I think they're going to take time and shots and development away from some of their younger guys.
It just seems that the Wizards are like a rudderless ship. They kind of bounce from one thing to another, and nothing ever really seems to, it's never like 3 steps forward and 1 step back. It's like 1 step forward and 1 step back. They just seem like they're stuck in second gear as a franchise. Well,
I worked with Michael Winger. Michael got promoted to the GM when I left there. And Michael's is a terrific guy and very smart. So I know there must be some other reason for him doing this because, he does his homework. He looks at all the alternatives and stuff. So I don't know. There must be some other reason or some other plan, another step or two, maybe down the line, what he's going to do with AD or Young. But if you just look on the face of it, I just don't see those guys moving them up, because if you look at Trae Young, he had the 1 year where they got, I think, to the Western Conference Finals, maybe, or Eastern Conference Finals, that 1 year. But since then, I just don't think he can put a team on his back and carry them. He's just not that kind of player. He's a guy that his statistics look great, very impressive. But I just don't know that he's going to move that team, further.
Yeah. So one team that kind of made a significant move at the deadline is the Celtics, trading Anfrenee Simons, known as the Anferno in Boston, which I thought was a really good nickname. The way that guy could just he was combustible at times, for Nik Vucevich coming over from Chicago. Now, Boston, it's funny. He's not really a rim protector. Kata kind of gives them that. But is this the kind of thing where maybe he can play with Kata, give them a too big look, and put Boston in a better position to compete, deeper into the playoffs than originally planned?
I really love this trade because I've always liked Vooch because he could always score. He could always rebound. He's not a defender. But if you don't play him, the guy can put 30 on a board in any given night. I think he really fits in offensively in a lot of ways with what they do. He's a guy that can score in the middle. I don't anticipate that they're thinking of playing the two bigs together right away. But I look at Houston that played Sengun and Steven Adams together, and it turned out great. And those guys are smaller and are bigger and slower than the other two. So I think in this environment in the league now, there are going to be games they're going to play that, and they'll get D from the other kid, and Vooch will score. You got to play him. I mean, you can't leave him alone. He can score. Good, solid veteran from everything I've ever read about him in the locker room. So I think he'll fit in great with Boston. And so I love this trade. And I want to say one thing about Brad Stevens, too. I think Brad has done one of the greatest jobs, right up there with Sam Presti. I think I was kidding you, Bruce. He can be a roommate with Sam in the great condo they have on a beach somewhere, because not only does he change most of his entire team to get below the aprons, cap reductions, but really they don't lose a step. I mean, he does it where he saves them a ton of money. He makes some smart moves to get certain guys back, and when Tatum comes back, at some point we can talk about whether he does it now or later, but they really just kind of held the position they had before. And it's another great pat on the back for Joe Mazzulla. He's shown himself to be just a terrific coach in the league.
One of the reasons Boston got off to such a good start this year was the fact that, Anfrenee Simons, who was a starter in Portland, accepted a role coming off the bench. Right. Now, since that trade, Pritchard has gone back to the bench. He was in the starting lineup. Now he's going back to the bench. Now, I think luckily for Joe, Pritch is one of those guys that, he's managing to get his 20, 22 points off the bench. So, I mean, he never seemed like a guy who was greedy for numbers. But do you see them being better with Simons? Were they better with Simons coming off the bench and Pritchard starting, or with Pritchard coming off the bench and taking over that role?
I love Pritchard coming off the bench. And I think because he got a chance to start, I think he's proven to himself that he can be a starter in this league. I think that's beyond doubt. Okay. I think a lot of teams see him as a starter. And once you've proven that to yourself and the team, it's a lot easier to go to the bench. Okay. You don't see it as a demotion, or I couldn't live up to being a starter. And the other thing with Pritchard now is I think he's got more freedom to score with the second unit, because now you got Jaylen Brown, you got Tatum when he comes back, there's going to be less shots. So I think this is a chance for him to really stand out. And depending on where they move Vucevic, come off the bench, or what combinations there are, I think Pritchard's going to be one of those guys who, you're going to be talking about him 6th man of the year territory a lot of times for the rest of his career.
Hey, Dave, now out of Golden State now with the Jonathan Kuminga, saga, the ugliness over with there, and having him dealt to Atlanta for Kristaps Porzingis and the fact that the Clippers we talked about have said goodbye to Harden and Zubac. Where do you think the Warriors' playoff chances have they improved at all? Do you think after everything's going on, are they still destined for a play-in spot again?
The thing with Porzingis is there's such an attractiveness in the package, but you got to keep him on the court to get the benefits of that package. And that's what he's had a really hard time doing. And when he had good stretches for the Celtics, God, they were really good. He's had good stretches in a lot of his teams, but he doesn't seem to be able to have a really consistent year for like 65 games even, and into the playoffs and things. So to answer that question, Michael, I would probably say if they can keep him on the court and he can play near the top of what he's capable of, they might be able to stay in the play-in tournament. I don't know that they can get, into 6 or something, but I just think the loss of Jimmy Butler is really hard to overcome.
Now, Dave, I want to ask a follow-up on this deal here and kind of focus more so on what Atlanta got in this, and that's Jonathan Kuminga. On our last week's show, we had a Warriors insider on that was hoping that the Warriors were going to keep Kuminga in an effort to develop him, be part of the young core, and maybe possibly even just move on from Steve Kerr, since it was Steve Kerr and Kuminga that butted heads. But now you look at Kuminga in Atlanta, I just don't see really how he fits there. I'm curious to see what you think Atlanta has in store in the future for Kuminga, given the fact that they already have Jalen Johnson, who's broken out this year. They've got Okongwu. They already have some pieces that kind of fill that 3-4 spot in the rotation. So just curious why you think Atlanta took the chance on Kuminga.
They might like him, and not that he has to be a starter, but, he wasn't even getting consistent minutes off the bench in Golden State. Play a little, then sit a little. And it was interesting when they made the trade, Steve Kerr, who's been a great coach, obviously, Steve said he didn't handle it well and made some mistakes with it, but he didn't come out and say what those mistakes were or why he didn't handle it well. But I think, hey, if they're giving Kuminga 20, 25, 28 minutes off the bench, they're going to get an idea what he can do. And sometimes with his ability to score, now if he's coming off the bench, he's playing against second team guys on the other team. So they might find a nice guy who just gives them like Anfrenee Simons in a different way. He's giving us points off the bench that we really haven't been able to have. And they get a look at the kid, and he may be just happy to get the minutes, because there always seemed to be this tug of war with he and Steve, and nobody really knows, unless I guess you were there, what was the cause of it.
All right. Now, given all the attention that Giannis was receiving with his future influx in Milwaukee, were you surprised that he wasn't moved by last Thursday's deadline?
Yeah, everything. And I listened he was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. Actually, it was with Doc Rivers' son, Austin, who was doing a podcast with him. And it was a really long podcast. And he really just talked about what he loved about Milwaukee and the franchise. And, it wasn't like a political waving goodbye kind of statement, and I know occasionally the talks I've had with Doc over the years is I didn't think they were going to move him unless there was some fantastic franchise changing deal. We got 5 first-round picks and we got 2 young guys who have the potential to be stars kind of thing. And I don't think they got that. And I think it's been basically about his health, because he's, as of a couple of weeks ago, before he got this new injury, he'd only played in like 30 out of 45 games or something like that. And when he's in the lineup, they're a much better team. They made the Miles Turner deal. So I think next year is about, or the draft is about, we got to fill in behind them and come back next year and, everybody's healthy.
So you anticipate Giannis starting next season with Milwaukee Bucks as of now? That would be your guess?
I do, because I can't imagine they went to every team that they thought there was something on there that they would have liked to get. and they couldn't find it. I don't think they were going to just give him away. It wasn't going to be a fire sale or anything. And maybe in the quiet talks with him, they've told him who they're going after next year as free agents or whatever. And the one thing it seems to me, and everything I've read about him, is he's a loyal guy. Now, let me put that in context, because I take his situation like KG when we got him in Boston. I think KG had been in Minnesota 9 years or something at that point. Loyal as the day is long, didn't want to leave, and what it took him to leave was really realizing, I can't win a title here. And Boston now has Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Doc Rivers, and Danny Ainge, and a couple other guys, on the roster. I might be able to win a title there. And that's what changed KG's mind. Now, does that happen at some point, maybe in the offseason this year or next season? Maybe he comes to that same realization that I have to leave because we're just not going to be good enough here. Because I think he really wants to win that title again.
Hey, Dave, given how their season has gone so far, were you at all surprised that the Orlando Magic didn't make some sort of significant move at the trade deadline?
I can't figure that team out.
Well, you're not alone.
Yeah. They're a couple games over 500. They're coached well. You look at the players, Banchero, Wagner, and I'm forgetting the two other guys that are on their
Bane,
team.
Suggs.
Yeah. And I just don't know why they're not better. I really don't. And I was expecting them to be a team that was going to be right up in that top four or five teams right now in the East. And they're just not there. And I don't see urgency on the floor. I don't see, they've had some guys with some injuries, but so is everybody. So that team's a mystery to me. I would have thought they would have tried to do something. Maybe there was just nothing that they wouldn't have had to give up one of their top guys right now. So, yeah, they're a puzzle to me, Michael.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap up tonight's show with some fun questions. Bruce, why don't you lead us off?
Dave, the 76ers are on a roll. 6 wins in their last 7. They've gotten healthy. Embiid looks pretty good. Do you think that team can be a force in the East down the stretch and in the postseason?
I think if Embiid is healthy and Maxey stays healthy, I think they've got a chance to be a tough team to play in the playoffs, because Embiid, I think his last 6 or 7 games, he's averaging about 33 points. He's playing 36 minutes. He looks like the Embiid 5 years ago before all the injuries started. So I think that's a team that if they can stay healthy, they've got a chance to make a little noise. I don't think they're a championship team by any stretch, but they're going to be a tough out in the first round, second round. So, maybe they can get to the second round if they stay healthy, depending on who they match up with. I like what they're doing now. Embiid looks healthy. He looks happy. He looks like he's playing hard. And so are the other guys. Maxey's turned into a star.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Dave, one of the teams of the moment were the Charlotte Hornets here, who had won 9 in a row until their loss Monday night to the Pistons. But I want to get your thoughts on this Charlotte team, because, all of a sudden they have one of the, now that they're all healthy, they seem to have one of the best starting fives in the league, and they're climbing up into that play-in field. Do they have a shot to stay in that play-in tournament field? Can they get potentially even further up the standings?
I love what they're doing. And you do a double take when somebody tells you, oh, they've won 11 out of their last 15 or 13 or whatever. You go, no, that's not Charlotte. Who are you talking about? I love the rookie, Kubel.
Knipple. Yep.
You see the things he's doing. That's an addition. I've never been a big LaMelo fan, just in general. But with the guys around him now, he's fitting in. I think they've got talent again. They're obviously getting well coached. So this is one of those teams you just never know. Is this a year where they go on a little roll? They get into the first round. They have an upset in the first round, build a little more confidence, because this is a defining year for them, because they've really, nobody even thinks about them at the beginning of each season, And I want to take a segue on that too, because there's one team I just want to mention they're the opposite to me now of Sacramento. Sacramento has been in the playoffs 1 year in the last 20. In the last 20 years, they've only had 2 seasons over 500, both with Mike Brown as the coach, and then they fired him after the second season. They actually won an NBA title back in 1951. But I don't know that anybody in Sacramento knows that because they won it in Rochester. In 1951 as the Rochester Royals. They have not been back to the NBA Finals in 75 years.
Unbelievable.
3/4 of a century. So the question is, and their owner, Ranadive, has owned the team for the last 13 years. And every good coach they have, he seems to fire. I don't know, maybe he's got something against good coaching. But when is this team going to figure out what it takes to win? I mean, that's 20 years. You get in the playoffs once. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, they don't like good point guards either because they traded Tyrese Halliburton and then said, you know what, we don't need De'Aaron Fox either.
Yeah, don't need Fox, don't need Halliburton. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's do you have any idea why they made the DeAndre Hunter trade? Because I didn't understand that flip too, and getting rid of a guy like Keon Ellis, who was a younger guy, an affordable guy that played defense, brought energy, and seemed to be a fan favorite there. I didn't understand that flip either.
Yeah, I think sometimes you look at Sacramento and you kind of just scratch your head. Hey, they put a nice beam up, but other than that, there's just not much going on that anybody gets excited about. I mean, and you look at Charlotte that had been kind of in that territory a little bit, but is making a lot of progress. And you look at Sacramento and they're just stuck. Yeah. Every year, no playoffs.
Well, you look at the Hornets and the youth of that team. No team plays more rookies than the Hornets by a mile. And then you look at Sacramento at the trade deadline passes. DeMar DeRozan's still on the team. Right. Zach LaVine's still on the team. Yep. Sabonis is still on the team. I mean, that pretty much explains the difference in those two teams right there.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I wanted to segue real quick as World B brought up DeRozan and LaVine. Of course, Sacramento took them off Chicago's hands. And I was just curious about the Bulls. I know this is something we talked about pre-show here. The Bulls traded away DeRozan, LaVine, Alex Caruso, Vucevic, and Lonzo Ball. All those guys, they didn't get back one first-round pick. And one thing that the Bulls did this trade deadline is they acquired 9 second-round picks. So I'm just curious, from Chicago's standpoint, was that a failure to have all those players leave? I know they got Josh Giddey in the Caruso deal. But outside of that, I mean, you just have a bunch of second-round picks. Would you consider that a failure or at least a head scratcher?
When you start sending players to other teams and those players make a contribution to other teams, and you wonder why either you didn't keep them or get a player who could make a better contribution to your team, not just similar, or you got no contribution back. Yeah, you got to wonder, maybe they thought they weren't 9 second-round picks. They thought they were 9 first-round picks. They have to look at the fine print in the trade announcement or something. But yeah, Chicago, it's kind of like you keep waiting. I always kept waiting for them to have a breakout season, and it just doesn't seem to come. And yeah, I don't know. There are a bunch of teams that you keep looking at them and you go, okay, what are they thinking about? What's their plan? What's their process? And sometimes I love Giddey. I think Giddey's a really nice player. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you can't quite figure okay, what direction do they go? Do they just wake up and there's no process to it? There's no thought to it? They're one of those teams for me.
No doubt about it. Now, looking at the league landscape as a whole here, injuries have once again taken a big toll on the NBA season. So my question to you is there any solution to this? Does the league, need to reconsider anything moving forward to kind of help eliminate some of these injuries, or at the very least, rethink the 65-game rule when it comes to awards, because we're seeing a lot of great talented players that aren't going to be eligible for awards this year.
Yeah, I think that one, certainly they've got to rethink that. And as far as the injuries go, I mean, the NBA teams are all staffed with really smart trainers, chefs, performance coaches, strength coaches, and they work with players every day throughout the season. If you're not in the city that they're in, and you go somewhere else, they send the trainer and an assistant coach with you to work you out and do all the other stuff. So it's not a matter of they don't have the resources, but the thing that happens is you just can't plan on some of these injuries. They've had a bunch of guys with calf injuries this year, and really with a lot of lower body injuries. And I think what's happened too is we've gotten so athletic over the years and decades that I don't know if bodies can get any faster or more athletic or things. And is there a different way, not so much during the season, but in the off season, is there a different way to plan than people going out, especially your young guys, and getting up 500 shots a day or 300 shots a day? Because it's still wear and tear on your body. I loved what Kareem used to do. Kareem would go do Pilates or heavy rope, or he'd go bicycling. He never touched a basketball for much of the summer until maybe September came around. But maybe there's a different way to look at the off season and things like that, because so many of these players got injured in the first, 40 games, 30 games. It wasn't like, oh, it's end of season injuries after the grind and, and everything else, but it really has effect early in the season, late in the season, and certainly if it's right before playoffs, it's a terrible thing to have to deal with injuries to key guys. And, the Clippers went through it obviously with Kawhi and Paul George after they made the trade, and their team never was able to be as good as they thought it was going to be, just because those guys couldn't find any time to play together or when it counted.
Hey, David, real quick follow on that. When you talk about injuries, how much of the style of play in this current generation of NBA offense, as it were, is contributing to these types of, you mentioned the calf injuries becoming a bigger deal, kind of replacing almost the ACL as the injury of the moment in this generation? And I heard Steve Kerr like a month ago in a press conference talk about how defenses are forced to come out on three-point shooters, rotate over quicker than they've ever had to do it before. And that's potentially a contributing factor to the injury increase or the specific type of injuries. Is there any merit to that? Is the type of offense that we see now and the three-point, everything around the three-point line, is that contributing to the if not the increased injuries, the types of injuries that we're seeing?
Well, I know that each team has to log all their injuries, and the league gets all that data at the end of the year. So, I would think all the league doctors and the team doctors, when they meet each summer, they would say, oh, we're noticing a lot of injuries that occur around the three-point line or something. But I haven't heard anything like that. So, I mean, you look at Halliburton and I think Tatum, they just turned ankle. Jokic, when he hurt his knee, his teammate actually fell into him backwards. Jimmy Butler goes down, just lands funny on his leg, ACL. It's just really weird. We had Tony Allen on the Celtics, and Tony was really athletic, had a breakaway dunk. I mean, no one had even gotten over half court with him. Tony goes up, he dunks it, but as he comes back, he's leaning backwards a little. His leg is straight, and he lands on the heel of that leg, tears his ACL. I mean, so some of these plays, it's not the three-point play or getting knocked down on a drive or anything. They're just haphazard, and you can't even, the training staff can't even prepare for somebody like Jimmy Butler's or Tony Allen's, because it's just out of the middle of nowhere, But it's tough because it has sometimes it's your biggest opponent on some teams.
Circling back a little bit to where we were a couple minutes ago on the 65 game rule, I had said a couple weeks ago on this show that I thought they should maybe consider making it a 62 game rule, because then you're still playing more than 3/4 of the team's games, as opposed to just kind of arbitrary 65. Now, that brings me to who I consider to be the greatest all-around player of all time, LeBron James. LeBron James has missed 17 games to this point, okay? Mm-hmm. So if he plays every single game the rest of the way, he would get to 70 or to get to 65, okay? Making him eligible for All-NBA. Right. And, he's not going to win any postseason awards, but at least he'd be eligible for like All-NBA second or third team, let's say. Right. I believe, and again, I'm speaking as a total fan of the guy, but I believe his ego is such that he's really going to try and play every game the rest of the way so that he can continue that streak of, 1,000 years in a row making an All-NBA team. Do you think, though, that it's a good idea for the team that he do that? Or is it like, you got to just trust LeBron? He knows his body better than anyone. He wants to win. He's not going to do anything to jeopardize the team. I mean, can he have it both ways?
Yeah, I mean, it's for a guy like him, I mean, you've got to give him some leeway, obviously. He's if he feels good and he doesn't think, he's going to hurt the team playing, certainly, I try to put myself in his shoes and, man, I want to play. We have a chance to win. We got 3 guys once Reeves gets healthy and, Luke is here and I'm here. This might be my last, go round. So I think something like that makes a lot of sense, and, I think it's tough when you try and put limitations on games too, because what if LeBron just wanted to play 2 minutes every game for the rest of the, they don't say you have to play a certain amount of minutes. You can just get in a game, so there are a lot of ways you could, have fun with that. If he felt like it looked like he was going to be 2 or 3 games short and he had an injury, he could go on for the jump ball and they could sub him out,
Of course, that'd take his points per game number down, and that might cost him a spot because of that.
Well, I have a great story if we have time to tell you about that. So
Bring it.
I'm playing in Buffalo, and at this point, I'm kind of like the 3rd or 4th guard with Jack Ramsey, the coach. We have McAdoo, we have Jim McMillan, we have a couple guys like that. Good team. Ernie DiGregorio is our starter. So we have a home game. We're playing against Rick Barry and the Warriors, who won the championship that year. Game's tied. Okay. Timeout. They're going to take the ball out right in front of our bench. I've been sitting on the bench now for 47 minutes and 55 seconds in the odd in Buffalo. Okay. And the building wasn't heated. It was heated by crowd when the crowd got there. And guys, when they'd sit on the bench, we had towels wrapped around our legs, the hydroculator heat pads. You'd put a couple towels around them and lay them on your hands to keep your hands warm. Timeout comes, and I'm in the outside of the timeout huddle, and Jack Ramsey's looking around and goes, Dave, in for Ernie. We need defense. So I'm literally frozen stiff, and the guy I have to guard is this Whippet Swift guard named Charlie Johnson for the Golden State. And Charlie's sort of on the other side of the court now, coming out of the timeout where the 3-point line would be when it was in. So I trudge over to Charlie, and I'm jealous right away because he's got a really nice sheen of sweat on his body, and I get to Charlie and I grab him by his jersey and I pull him close to me. And I said, Charlie, if you so much as move, I'll kill everybody you love, everybody in your family that's ever been in there. Charlie looks at me and he starts laughing. He's trying not to laugh. He goes, don't worry, it's going to Barry. Ball comes, Barry misses a shot, overtime. I'm walking back to the bench. Jack's like, Ernie, in for Dave.
Nice.
So now I get in the locker room and I'm looking at, I played 5 seconds. And Jim McMillan, who I played against in the Ivy League, Jimmy Mack had the seat next to me. And he goes, well, that's not the worst part. And I said, it's not? What's the worst part? He said, well, they don't put you on the stat sheet five seconds. They just put 1 minute. They don't go below 1 minute. So that's going to lower your stats even more. And Jimmy looks at me with a straight face for a second. Then he starts laughing. Pretty soon I start laughing. It was hilarious. And I'm thinking, this is the great psychological stuff you get from a former Ivy Leaguer to make you feel better.
At least you didn't commit a turnover. That would have really hurt you there. So that's a good one there.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, kind of looking at, post deadline, all the moves have been made. We might get a few buyout guys, but for the most part, the dust has settled. We know what the roster is going to be the rest of the way. So, looking around the league, a team like San Antonio is still very intriguing. Do you think they have enough to win it all as soon as this season? And who else would you put in that conversation as a legitimate title contender?
I think San Antonio's got a shot. I mean, they've beaten Oklahoma City a couple times. They've got the big kid, Stephen Castle. They've got a nice team, Darren Fox. So I like them. I also like Houston. If Adams gets healthy and can play, I like the fact that KD gives them scoring. He's been through the playoffs. I think they'll be a tough out. The Cleveland trade with Harden, I really want to see what Cleveland does because I think it takes the onus off Mitchell to have big scoring games every night because Harden's going to have some nights where he throws 35 on the board And I think he's going to help their two bigs, Mobley and Allen, get a lot easier shots at the rim. So I think they're going to be a much better offensive team if they stay healthy with Harden than they were with Garland. So I like them. I'm trying to think of the other guys. The Knicks and the Celtics, I like their outside chance because I just think they've been there the whole year playing against the best competition and winning games nobody thought they'd win. The Knicks, nobody wants to believe that they're actually good enough yet. It's like the curse of the Knicks, like every year you go, oh, the Knicks are ready. It's this year. And then they don't make it. So it's almost kind of like, okay, they have to prove it to me that they can get there. But I like what they're doing too. Well,
it could be the curse of the NBA Cup with the Knicks too. They won the Cup and then they went on this terrible downfall, and no team has ever won the Cup and the championship.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's and Denver's another team. If they stay healthy and they get Gordon back too, Jokic is just. I mean, you look at all the triple doubles a center has. I mean, it's stunning. This guy, I know people don't really put him ahead of some of the other great centers in history, but boy, oh boy, I don't know why, because there's nothing he can't do on the court. Nothing against any kind of competition. And he just, comes and he gets a triple double, just write it in. So, so I think there's 5 or 6 teams that might have a shot. And we've got to talk about Oklahoma City too, because once they get healthy, everybody's healthy, assuming Shea comes back. You got to give the defending champs at least a little, heads up and say that, they got a shot.
Yeah, especially with the acquisition of Jared McCain, which I thought was a sneaky move by them, adding some more shooting depth for now and into the future there. But Dave, this has been a lot of fun per usual, and kind of like your day in Buffalo. We appreciate you sitting down with us for about 47 minutes and 55 seconds. So with that, we're going to let you go so you can go play some defense for about 5 or so seconds. And that will do it for this edition of the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back with you later on this week to be sure you're up to date in 48 on all things around the association. Take care, everybody.